Thanks, Elaine.
Thank you, Megan. And I say this whenever Megan asked me to do a presentation. I don't know if I've ever said no to her. I will switch my schedule around completely because I think the world of Megan, and she is one of the greatest accomplishments in my career as a professor at UNI. And I'm just excited that I get to continue to work with her. And she still hears from me by email, at least, I don't know what, 10, 15 times a week, Megan. So first of all, I do run the Dementia Simulation House up at UNI. If you have not been to see us, just a heads up, I'm sure Megan can maybe send this information out later or in the newsletter as a refresher, but we are open to anyone and everyone. We do not charge. That's kind of the fault of our business model that we don't charge, and we're trying to continue to do this because we just think it is really incredibly important. So whether you are a family caregiver, whether you are just a community member, whether you're a professional caregiver, a student, we would love to see you here. And I will say, this is something also that we would love it if you were able to mention if people seem interested in learning more about dementia when you do your sessions. And there is a link that they can go online and they can just book a spot and come and see us. So I love talking about dementia in the senses. I could talk about dementia in the senses all day. I'm going to try not to. Let's see if I can get this slide to, there we go. Okay. So I know that we associate dementia with memory loss. So I know that you guys kind of probably fight the same battle that I do because you know more about dementia than the average person. And when you talk about dementia, people say, oh, dementia, it's about people being forgetful. It's about memory loss. And obviously that can and does happen. I'm not trying to rank symptoms of dementia or issues with dementia, but this is something I actually feel like might be more useful for people to learn than continually focusing on that memory loss. And the reason I say that is because dementia impacts how people experience the world. And if we can understand how these people experience the world, it's really useful. It's really useful. And it's really is, like Megan said, it is a game changer. So I think it was maybe 13 or 14 years ago when I started learning more about dementia and academically going in that direction of wanting to do more research and more outreach and more teaching about dementia. And when I really fully understood this, one of my first thoughts was, why are we always talking about memory? Why are we talking about this? So I'm going to give you a greater grasp of this. And like I said, I could teach all day. So Megan, if you want to coordinate an all-day conference where I could spend 2 hours on each of the senses, I would be there. I don't know if anybody else would be there, but so you get information 5 ways, your 5 senses. I don't know what year we learn about this, maybe say 2nd grade, something like that. But everything you know about this world is based on these 5 methods of intaking information. And that's true, obviously, of everyone, including people who have dementia. So dementia changes not necessarily your eyes, your ears, your hands, but what dementia really changes is the way your brain is interpreting that information. So the dementia brain has to work really hard. Okay, the dementia brain has to work really hard to interpret all of the information that is coming in. And the dementia brain is going to tire out very quickly. So one of the things that we don't talk enough about also with dementia is this brain overload. So when someone withdraws, maybe they become irritable, maybe they become aggressive, maybe we say they are, quote, a behavioral issue. Please don't say that. Don't say behavioral issue. Don't say behavioral problem. You know what those things are? They're symptoms, right? So, someone with lung cancer coughs and you'd never say they're annoying and they have a behavior problem. But that's really what we're doing to people who live with dementia. So when your brain is overloaded, my guess is that you do a lot of these same things. It's just that your brain takes more to be overloaded than a dementia brain. So we use the analogy here at our dementia simulation house a lot of mental energy pennies. I'm sure we didn't make it up. I don't know who did. I'm sure we stole it from somewhere. But mental energy pennies are just kind of our quote token example of how your mental energy depletes throughout the day. So I wake up in the morning, just random number that I'm throwing out. I might have 100 mental energy pennies, and that's going to depend on some different things. It's going to depend on how well I slept before, for example, if I've been sick. But throughout my day, things happen that are going to deplete those mental energy pennies. And I may become withdrawn. Like I just don't really want to talk to anybody. I don't know if any of y'all get that way, right? When your mental energies are depleted, maybe you get really irritable. Maybe you get in a place where maybe you don't act on your aggression, but maybe you feel like this sense of rage. Okay. So people with dementia, same thing, except they might wake up in the morning, and depending on the progress of their disease, depending on what they did yesterday, their mental energy pennies, maybe they're 15 today, and they get up and they struggle to make coffee, right? They have to try a few different times. They hit wrong buttons. Maybe one time they forget to put, I don't know if anybody's ever done this. I've done this. Forget to put the mug underneath the Keurig. Anybody done that? Maybe just me. But something like that happens. They have to clean it up. They had 15 mental energy pennies. They're down to 8, just like that. 8. Okay. So then, their spouse comes in and they're really grumpy. And they're, quote, giving them a hard time. Well, it's not about them. What's actually happening is the person with dementia has a hard time. So what I want to really get at here is that the dementia brain has to work really hard to interpret all of the information coming in from your 5 senses. Their brain gets very overloaded in doing that. That is going to lead to withdrawal, irritability, and aggression. And interpreting things, just looking around a room and all of the pictures and the items your brain has to interpret, it sounds crazy, but that's going to deplete mental energy pennies. I will talk about hearing as well. So having to focus in on the voice and filter out all the other sounds, that's going to deplete mental energy pennies as well. So again, they become withdrawn, irritable, potentially aggressive. So I'm going to start with sight. And this is actually, this is one I usually talk a lot about. And I always have trouble when I give a presentation because I try to make time for all 5 senses. And then poor smell and touch are always at the end. And I don't always have time to get to poor smell and touch. And I feel bad about that. So I am going to talk about sight more quickly than I typically do, because that is the one that is mentioned in the champions training or the friends training that you do. So some of the issues we have with sight, we have depth perception issues. So someone might think a rug is a hole or a pool or water. So it's hard sometimes with someone who has dementia. If I have, here's my phone out here, and if I'm reaching for my phone, I might reach too far or not far enough. So you might see someone kind of being all grabby and you're like, what are they even trying to grab? Another issue is going to be problems with misidentification. So sometimes with dementia, we do have visual hallucinations. So it might be that a person with dementia sees something that just is not there. And that does happen. What is actually more common is someone with dementia, their brain is working really hard to interpret everything they're seeing, but they will misinterpret something. So one of my favorite examples is a time I was at a nursing home and there were some women sitting around at a table in the dining room. And I just, I said, hi, how are you ladies? And they said, we'd be better if that man stopped staring at us. He comes every day. He just stands over in that corner and he stares at us. So I look over and I don't see a man, but what I do see is a coat rack. I see a coat rack, and that coat rack has a hat on it and a coat on it. And I can see how if someone was their brain was struggling to interpret their sight, that could potentially look like a man. So the brain has to work really hard to interpret lots of visual stimuli at once. So clutter is very tiring to the dementia brain. And that is an issue because many people with dementia do have issues with hoarding and clutter. And if you've ever watched Hoarders, anybody ever watch Hoarders? I have a couple of feelings about Hoarders. There's 2 types of people in the world. There are people who watch that, and you can raise your hand if you watch it. There are people who watch it and they just want to clean their house. Anybody have that feeling? I just need to clean my house right now. Ready? Okay. I have the opposite feeling when I watch hoarders. I'm like, I could not clean my house in 10 years and it still would not be this bad. So actually has the opposite effect on me. But when I watch hoarders, you see like a lot of stuff just kind of pushed together, and you're looking at it and you're like, what do I see there? And this is even on your TV screen, not in person, but you're like, is that on a chair at the top of that stack? Is that a dead cat? You know, what's going on in there? And your brain has to kind of take a while to sort through it all. Same for the dementia brain, except it's going to be more difficult and more tiring. So I can't see all of you because you don't have your screens on, but those of you who have your screens on and those of you who don't, do this for me. Take your hands right here and put them around your eyes. So as dementia changes your brain, your occipital lobe becomes unable to interpret what you're seeing in the peripheral vision and just blocks that out, okay? So your vision is gonna look like this. And actually your peripheral vision does decline a little bit as you age. It's not normally a big deal for people because it's gradual and you adjust. But with dementia, you're coming right in here. Couple implications that has, I'm sure you can infer what that means about when you approach somebody. Approach them from the front, don't approach them from the side, and be really careful because a lot of times we touch someone with dementia before they know we're there. And that can be really anxiety provoking. Another issue we have with that is social vision and task vision. So if someone with dementia is working on something here, maybe it's a crossword puzzle, they don't see the people around them. So it may become very difficult for them to have a conversation and interact with people while they're doing something because they can't see those people. So keep that in mind. Also, as people are walking, if your vision looks like this, you're probably pretty scared you're going to fall because you can't see the ground. So you start looking at the ground, but the problem is you can't really see the people around you. Facial recognition. So one of the things with sight that sometimes we do to individuals living with dementia is we put our face right here in front of their face. And there's some idea, I don't know where people get this idea. Someone teaches them this when they're young. I don't know. I think I must have been taught this too because I had the same idea. But we tend to think people are more likely to recognize us if we're right here in their face. Do y'all like people right here in your face, like 6 inches away? Is that comfortable? Okay, so it's not comfortable for you. Why would it be comfortable for someone who's living with dementia? It's not, right? And keeping in mind, your vision looks like this. So if someone is 6 inches in front of you, right here in your face, the issue is that they can't see what's out here and what's out here. They're going to feel very blocked in. They're going to feel very intimidated. And also because they can't get a full picture of you, they have a harder time identifying who you are. You're much better backing up 6 feet and having them kind of look you up and down and be able to see all of you in order to have the best chance of recognizing you. So we talked a little bit about how you approach someone. Approaching from the front, I recommend stopping 6 feet away and doing, I kind of call it like a presentation, like, hey, Megan, it's Elaine from You and I, right? I'm going to say who I am. I'm not going to play a guessing game, right? But I'm going to wait for her to give me some signal, whether it is a nod, whether it is a verbal signal. Maybe it's just a little bit of eye contact or kind of a change in her demeanor if she's not verbal. And then that tells me, okay, she's processed me and I'm going to move in a little bit closer. However, you have to be aware when you're helping someone who lives with dementia, and this is tricky, but my vision is like this. Okay, here's my vision. So let's say I ate lunch and I had peanut butter and jelly and I got some jelly on my shirt. Okay, I do this all the time. Like I will go give a presentation someplace and I'll be in front of like 200 people. And then afterwards, someone will say, do you realize you have some like toothpaste on your shirt? Tell me before. People like, why would you tell me after? Tell me before. But I am someone who has a lot of dropsies. I end up with a lot of things on my shirt. So if my vision is like this and I need a little assistance and someone comes in with their hand here, what am I going to do? Yes. Absolutely. Boom. Because you know what? I'm a woman. And if someone touches me unexpectedly between here and here, and I don't understand why, and I don't see that touch coming, that's what I do. That's what I would tell my college girls to do, right? You know, I would say if someone does that on campus, you are perfectly justified in doing that. So keeping in mind that you want to potentially take their hand and you'll say first, hey Elaine, I see you got something on your shirt. Shoot, let me grab something and then let's get that off. So they may grab my hand actually and kind of take it with, so I know that that touch is going to be coming. All right. Hearing. So one thing I always think with dementia is, you know, sometimes people with dementia hear too well. And the reason I say that is because many times what is actually happening is someone with dementia is hearing too much and are not able to filter what is really important. So difficulty with deciding what is your priority. So for instance, I'm sitting here, I'm at the dementia simulation house. So I feel like I hear someone cutting our lawn. I know it's cold out, but it must be maybe the last time they're cutting our lawn or doing something to our lawn. So I hear this like buzzing sound from university facilities. My colleague Erin is in the other room and she's working and she's pretty quiet, but if I stop, I might be able to hear her kind of mumbling because I think she's on a Zoom call across the house. None of those things are distracting to me right now. It's only when I stop and listen that I hear them. If I had dementia and I was here talking to you, this presentation, okay, listening to Megan earlier, listening to somebody on Zoom, you know, this conversation would not be more important in my brain than a lawnmower outside and a colleague maybe talking in the distance. Turn off the TV, right? Turn off the TV. So we're working on something for a hospital and it is going to, on the front page, give 10 just kind of basic tips. And it's going to be a laminated sheet that is put in the room of every person who has dementia. Fingers crossed. We'll see how this goes. That's our hope. That's our goal. But the first thing on there, turn off the TV. Say this person has dementia. Number one, turn off the TV. Do not try to have a conversation with that individual while the TV is on, because even if they are trying to focus on you, it's really difficult for their brain and it takes a lot of mental energy, which is why maybe when you're talking to grandma now, she can have a great conversation for 3 minutes. And it used to be she could have a great conversation for 20 minutes. But guess what? Her brain is getting really tired now because to focus on this and block out all the other stimuli really takes a lot of energy and can be like really exhausting. A couple other things with hearing, just to keep in mind that if someone doesn't respond to you right away, it doesn't mean they didn't hear you, right? So if someone doesn't respond right away, it could be that it wasn't that you weren't loud enough. You were plenty loud. They heard those sounds, but what they're taking a long time to do or having difficulty with is processing that data. Unfortunately, sometimes what we do is, and I'm guilty of this too. So if I were to ask Megan a question, so I'm gonna ask Megan a question, but she's gonna have a hard time kind of processing it. So I'm gonna say, Megan, did you have breakfast yet? And she's just gonna look at me. And she doesn't respond. So you know what I'm gonna assume? She must not have heard me. So now I'm gonna say, Megan, did you have breakfast yet? Is that helpful? No. So the first time she was like trying to process, okay, it takes her longer to process, right? The second time I asked her, what does she think? She thinks I'm mad, right? I sound mad. So then her anxiety is going to go up. So anytime in dementia, and for all of us, your anxiety goes up, okay? Your cognition goes down. That's what test anxiety is all about. So if any of you have test anxiety, that test anxiety prevents your brain from working as it needs to work to do a test. So that's what I've done to her is I've given her anxiety. And now if she had any chance of coming up with the answer before, she certainly doesn't now. Okay. I have just increased her anxiety. The other thing I want to make clear about hearing is that, you know, this is true of sight as well. So one of the things we say often here at the house is you bring who you are into dementia. So there are people who are deaf, right? So there are people who are deaf and they may move into dementia. I don't have any reason to think that they wouldn't have dementia. I assume the rate is similar, if not higher. So someone with dementia is going to bring that with them. So what we have to think about here is, in terms of processing verbal data, it may be visual data, for instance, if they're using sign language. So keeping in mind that there may be other pre-existing issues that kind of change when we talk about the senses. So if you have someone who has been blind throughout the lifespan, or if you have someone who has macular degeneration, that's not part of dementia. But that exists, and it really is, going to make this a little bit more complex or complicated, in terms of how all of these symptoms of dementia kind of interact to give you the challenges that they might give you. All right, so I hear this a lot. Touch is important, and it is important for older people. It is important for people who live at home, with their partners as they age. It's important for people who live in nursing homes. So as people get older, we may find that there's less touch in their lives. As people get, quote, sicker, if they're in hospice, there's research that they may have minimal touch, and touch is important. But there are some of us who really like to be touched, and there are some of us who are a little bit more like, hey, no, kind of not my thing. I don't really know you that well. So we need to be really careful of just kind of throwing that out blindly, that everybody wants to be touched or wants to be touched by us. So about twice a year, there's usually a spring day and a fall day. I will be on our UNI campus, and Megan, I don't know if you remember this, but there will be someone out by the Union, maybe 4 or 5 people, and they have these giant sandwich signs, and they say free hugs. All right, so Megan, if you're on campus and you go past the Union and you see free hugs, what do?
Avoid eye contact.
Yep. Okay, so exactly. So you will see that there are some people who they see the free hugs and they proceed immediately to whoever wants to give them a free hug. I also see a lot of people who will walk an extra quarter mile out of their way to not get a free hug. So we are all different when it comes to touch, and that's still the same when it comes to dementia. So you really want to make sure that touch is welcome and pay attention to a person's signals, whether they are verbal or not. This is something that is very closely related to hearing as well. We don't like being touched unexpectedly, especially in certain places, and especially if we don't know who's touching us. So coming up behind someone, and I think anyone, but especially someone living with dementia, coming up from behind and putting your arm around that person, that's really anxiety provoking, because they might not have heard you or been able to distinctively understand there was someone coming up behind them, because I might hear someone coming behind me and look behind me. 2 things with someone with dementia: 1, peripheral vision is compromised. So even if they look, they may not see the person. 2, they may not hear that individual or not know what that sound is when someone walks up behind them. Another thing to keep in mind, and a lot of families are, when I say this, it's really sad for them, and it is sad, but when we hug someone, first of all, one of the things about touch is that sometimes, because the message kind of broken between your body and your brain, so when someone touches you, it may feel much lighter or harder than the other person perceives it to be. So sometimes you will hug someone with dementia and it will just feel like to them they're being crushed, and you think it's a gentle hug. The other thing is, it is easy to, if you have very, very short-term memory loss, it is easy to forget who's hugging you. So someone came in to hug me, and 3 seconds later, it's, oh my God, who's holding on to me? They're crushing me. Things can be really tricky also with some medical treatments with those living with dementia. One is just simple, like having someone take your blood pressure. Many times people with dementia have issues with that because they will feel like their arm is just being squeezed and squeezed, and they might cry or they might scream. And then again, we say they are difficult and they're a behavioral problem. No, that really feels like their arm is being squeezed, and being squeezed off. And it's scary for them because they don't understand why. Why are you doing this to me? When we talk about touch, keep in mind, we're also talking about the sensation of temperature. So I always say that our brain has something that I call like the oh shoot button. And it tells you like, oh, this is wrong. You got to fix this immediately or there's going to be a problem. So I have reached into the oven. I'm sure, I hope, otherwise I'm again the anomaly here. I hope y'all do this maybe occasionally so I don't feel weird, but I will forget a pot holder. Anybody done that? Yeah. Right away you forgot a pot holder. Okay. You reach in and it's, oh shoot. And your hand, you don't touch it and think, oh goodness, this seems very hot. I should remove my hands. You don't think that. You just think, oh shoot. And your hands automatically jump off of that. Someone with dementia kind of loses that reaction of, oh shoot. And again, this is about sensation and perception. They don't sense how hot that temperature is because that message to their brain is going to be broken. So they're going to carry that, pizza pan all the way from the oven over to, the kitchen table or the counter. And the next day somebody's going to say, why are your hands all blistered, Grandma? Well, I don't know. I have no idea. Another thing to keep in mind, bathing and hygiene can be a really big issue for people who live with dementia. And that's a question I get a lot. How do I get her to take a shower? She hasn't taken a shower in 3 weeks. My mom smells and she says she's taking showers, but I don't think she is. I hear this a lot. And it's not people being difficult. Okay. So a lot of times, oh, my grandma is so difficult when we try to give her a shower. Well, it's not that she's being difficult. So we need to be a little bit more of a detective. There's some reason she doesn't want to take a shower. And a woman I know once explained it to me as this woman had dementia. And she said, I don't want to take showers anymore because when I get in the shower, every bead of water hits me and it just feels like little needles, like piercing me all over my body, and it hurts. Her husband, really nice guy and wonderful care partner. He went to Target and he bought a whole new fixture for the shower. So she would have more options. You could turn it, the water pressure change, all these different things, and really, couldn't get past it. I think he ended up buying like 2 or 3, different fixtures, putting them on to see if they would help. And they didn't. So in that case, she told him, you know what, just, I like taking showers. She said, I've never taken baths really, but maybe that's what I'm going to have to do. So the next time she goes in there, she goes to take a bath, and she comes out and she has a towel on, and her husband says, why is your skin so red like that? Well, she had turned the temperature all the way up on the bathtub, as hot as it could be, and took a nice hot bath. But you know what? That water was scalding. And she sat in there, a good 15, 20 minutes. So, temperature can also be an issue. Water temperature can be an issue, people not being able to tell hot from cold. A tip I usually have for people in the home is, hey, if you have someone with dementia living in your home, can you turn down that water heater so that won't happen? Temperature is also an issue when you go outside. So when you go out, if I go outside wearing shorts and a t-shirt and it's negative 10 degrees, I'm going to have, again, my brain is going to go, oh shoot, no, go back in right away. I'm going to know I can't do that. Someone with dementia, their brain is not going to have that oh shoot reaction, and they may continue to walk. Whoops. All right. So I want to talk about smell and taste, and I'll kind of put them together just a little bit here as well. When we think about smell, first of all, smell has kind of a emotional component to it. So it's kind of interesting. My dad passed away in, oh goodness, maybe my dad passed away in May. And my dad was a smoker, and smoking killed him. And I flipped his condo to sell it. I actually close tomorrow. So me flipping a condo, if you know me, that's a pretty new thing for me, but I'm really proud that we did that. But one of the interesting things to me is I don't like being around cigarette smoke, but there's something about a very faint cigarette smell that I've realized I like. Now, don't get me wrong. After he died, his condo, I walked in and it was disgusting. It smelled, of cigarette smoke. But after he passed away, I realized I had his cell phone, and I smelled his cell phone, and I was like, oh, and it smelled good to me because it smelled like cigarette smoke. And I had that association with my father. That is a very weird thing to have a positive association with. But apparently, like, I had developed that association of that was my dad's smell. Like, cigarettes were my dad's signature smell. It is what it is, right? And then just a couple of weeks ago, I found his cell phone again, and it was in a laundry basket. And I pulled it out to smell it, and it no longer smelled like cigarette smoke. And I was disappointed. Strangely enough, I was disappointed by that. So smells evoke emotion, but someone with dementia may not remember why a certain smell makes them feel good or bad. So if someone is in a nursing home and, maybe someone is wearing a certain perfume, they may gravitate toward that person in kind of a way that you consider to be odd, and they may not even realize why they like that individual, but maybe it was the same perfume that their mother or their grandmother wore. Maybe this is a certain food smell that makes them happy. So keeping in mind, if you say, why do you like that smell, or why is that comforting to you? The brain may lose that, but the being drawn to the smell doesn't really change. Also with smell, our bodies and our brains are really, I think, pretty amazing. And the more I learned about dementia, the more I realized that our brains are just absolutely incredible. So smell alerts us to danger. So again, talking about that, your brain just says, oh, shoot. So if you walk into a house and it smells like there's a fire, you smell smoke. Oh, where's the fire? Your brain immediately says, oh no, like, we got to figure this out. We got to get out of here. What's going on? Someone with dementia is going to lose that connection. So it may not be that they really can't smell that smell, but they don't connect it the way that they may be used to in some cases. Same with chemical smells. Unfortunately, there have been people with dementia who have poured some bleach in a cup and drank that bleach. I don't think most of us could get bleach to our nose. Okay, so you put it in there, you start to come up. Oh no, right? You're going to put it back down. But someone with dementia is not going to smell that and think that's not a good thing to drink. Another thing we typically have is spoiled foods. With someone living with dementia, a few things play into that. People with dementia do have a high rate of foodborne illness, particularly in their homes, because it might be, oh, wow, you see something in the fridge. Oh, good. We went to Texas Roadhouse last night. I'm going to finish my fish I had from Texas Roadhouse. Did you really go last night? Did you go 3 weeks ago? And normally most of us do kind of a smell test on maybe leftovers or maybe milk. I'll be honest, there are some things in our house that maybe are a few days past that due date, and you're like, give it a smell. All right, I think we're okay here. But someone with dementia may not be able to do that. And then they may get ill, and we don't understand why they're ill, and they don't understand why they're ill. Smell also can alert us to poor hygiene, particularly in ourselves, in other people as well, but in ourselves. So I do this all the time. So I'll be the first to say this. How many of you ever wear clothes more than one time before you wash them? Yes. Okay. It's an environmental thing to do, right? Or being environmentally friendly. So you might wear something, like if I wear something to a work meeting and then, I come home and I take it off, it probably doesn't need to be washed. Obviously, I'm washing my gym clothes every time, but we have this sense of, okay, I put that back in here. Shoot, I've worn that a couple times. I wore it today. Does it need to be washed? How do you do this little check to make sure that something doesn't need to be washed? It is the smell test. Okay. And I know people who, and I have done this myself. I know people who sometimes will be like, oh, I'm going to go somewhere, you know, and I have something to go tonight. Do I need to shower? You kind of do that and you're like, nah, I'm okay. Someone with dementia is not going to be able to do that. So often a question, we walk into grandma's house and we're like, grandma, like, I don't know what's going on. Have you been showering? Because you smell grandma's body odor. Grandma either, you know, really can't smell it, or it doesn't alert her to anything that's problematic. So she's going to say, well, I showered last night, keeping in mind she has issues with memory. And she's not lying. Okay, she's not lying. In her mind, she really did shower last night. The other thing she might have done is, you know, you take a shower, maybe you take off the clothes you're wearing, you kind of fold them up a little bit, you put them on the kitchen sink, you get out, oh, clean clothes. You put those clothes back on. And how many days do you do that? Maybe even if you are taking a shower, it might just be the clothes. Taste. I could talk all day about eating and dementia. I mean, eating and dementia, showering / hygiene and dementia, those are really important topics. Really important because, you know, number one, we need people with dementia. We may want to lower our standards. Maybe they don't have to shower every day. Maybe it's every third or fourth day, but still we want to keep them clean. Obviously eating is a big issue because we don't like it when people waste away and it makes us really sad. And also this is kind of a cultural thing. Okay. My husband actually donated a kidney 2.5 weeks ago, and we had so many kind people in our lives to support us. But you know what they did to support us? They brought us lasagna. They brought us tuna noodle casserole. We have cinnamon rolls. They brought us all sorts of great stuff. And will we ever really eat all that stuff? No, particularly because my husband doesn't really have a great appetite right now anyway. We will never eat that stuff. And a lot of it will get thrown away. But that is okay because people felt good bringing it to us and we felt loved when they brought it. So this is a hard one because when we love people, we want to feed them. And sometimes people with dementia have trouble eating. Why do they have trouble eating? There are a lot of reasons. One is we talked about touch. This sounds weird, but we talked about touch and kind of tactile senses. Sometimes with dementia, you have something in your mouth and you might think it's really hard to chew. And it's not. So like, who made these brownies? They're like bricks. Well, they're not. They're like normal brownies, but that sense of touch has changed. So, you know, that feels differently to them. Another thing, just going back to why people don't eat, is that sometimes I didn't talk about color contrast, but if you have mashed potatoes on a white plate, they may not even see those mashed potatoes. So you say, well, she didn't even eat her mashed potatoes today. Well, she didn't know there were mashed potatoes there. But another reason why people don't eat is because tastes change. And I am not a musician, but what I like to say is it's kind of like having a guitar or a piano, and it's just like not quite in tune. So everything is just like a little bit off. And sometimes we experience this. I don't know if anybody's had, you know, if you've had a stomach virus or you've been very ill, or COVID issues. This is a new one we talk about. So you eat things and it's like, that just doesn't taste quite right. It's just like kind of off. Is it the same thing I had before? Like the other day I had I always get the same bubble tea at our bubble tea place, you know, because it's really great. I spend $7.50 on a bubble tea, you know, that's fantastic use of my money, right? But I don't do Starbucks. So I always get the same one. And one day I got it a couple weeks ago and I was like, this just doesn't taste right to me. Was it the same? I don't know, but it didn't taste right. So you kind of have that feeling where you're like, huh. So that's what dementia might be like. You want to keep in mind that really you can only taste 4 things. And it's a combination of these things that make up that whole taste. Neurologists are arguing about whether there is a 5th type of taste bud, but I won't get into that. So we've got sweet, salty, sour, bitter. People with dementia tend to crave sweet. You may have noticed this. So bitter stays pretty strong, but you can't taste sweet as well because the brain struggles to interpret from those taste buds. So people might want more and more sweet to compensate for that. So this is like the cake that grandma is making. And, you know, she's making her cake batter here, right? And, you know what a lot of us do right before we put a cake batter in the oven? You take a spoon and you just take a little taste, and grandma's like, ooh, that's like really bitter. I bet I forgot to put the sugar in it. Guess what? You just got double sugar in your cake. Many times people who don't want to eat, maybe more lured into eating if you give them something that is sweet. And if you're saying something like, well, yeah, but she has to eat more than ice cream or cookies. Number one, pick your battles. Keep in mind, I know people are diabetic, etc. Depends on the stage as well. What kind of diet you can quote get away with. I always say, for instance, if someone's in hospice, forget it. They eat what they want. Absolutely get whatever they want when they're in hospice. But if you've got someone who's early stage, that may be a little bit different. Keep in mind, you can always say, hey, I have this steak for you. And maybe you're going to put a little bit of maple syrup on the top of that. There was a nutritionist at UNI, nutrition professor, who got dementia. And I just always thought it was really ironic. Her daughter told me that, as she had Alzheimer's at the end of her life, she just put maple syrup on everything on her plate, the whole thing in maple syrup. But you know what? She ate. So keep that in mind. Sometimes people with dementia are going to say, to their family, hey, we do this green bean casserole at Thanksgiving every year. And when I made it, it was really good. You have my recipe. What did you do wrong? Now, it's awkward. Sometimes they will do this in a restaurant. My husband's grandmother has done this at a locally owned restaurant that she ate there when her husband was alive every year for their anniversary. And one day she went there, she ate something, and she called the waitress back and she said, you need to take this back and do it again. I've had this every year for the past 40 years. I don't know who your cook is, but you need to talk to him. And it was really awkward, of course, right? I talked about eating spoiled food. Also, we do unfortunately have an issue with eating non-food items. So you would think that someone would put something in their mouth, and when there's no taste or a weird taste, they would say, oh, this shouldn't go in my mouth. But again, everything is tasting off. They've maybe lost that cognition of this is something that's unsafe. Someone I know, he lived at home, but he actually, he had frontal temporal dementia, lived at home. And the point that his wife said he needs to go someplace was when he started eating marbles. And when the grandkids were over, he would take their like little toy like train pieces and like transformer pieces and Legos, and he would just have a mouthful of them. And she would say, what are you eating? And he'd go, it's good, it's good. And she'd have to open his mouth. And she said, no, like you can't live at home because there's no way I can keep you from doing that 24/7. So that is kind of, I don't know, like my brief-ish overview of all of the senses. And Megan, I don't know if we had questions before. We have questions now. Maybe we have time just for like one or two.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elaine. I got a private message. Someone said you're amazing, so you should know that. So somebody asked, Alicia just asked in the chat, how do you approach the subject of that with the person? So to them, so maybe a person with dementia, it doesn't taste right to them. And how do you let them know it's not that it tastes like that, it's their taste has changed?
You don't. All right. So we always do connect, don't correct. So it might, you can just say, oh, shoot, I'm sorry it tastes like that. Is there anything we could do to make that better? Because their reality is just as real to you or to them as your reality is to you. So that is their reality. You don't talk people out of their reality. So if they say something's not right, you say, is there any way we could change that? Like, would it help if we put cheese on it? I'm sorry, you're right. Maybe I did forget. Maybe I did forget to put the sugar in. I'm so sorry about that. So can we modify it? Or what else would you eat? What are you hungry for? Like, what could we do that would taste really good to you right now? Mm-hmm. So you don't really want to start an argument about it, because if something tastes bad to them, it tastes bad to them. And you're not going to change that. It's not going to taste good because you say, oh no, that's just in your head. It's still going to taste bad. So don't argue it.
Yeah. Thanks, Elaine. And we had another question previously that someone put at the beginning, and this might be our last one, but they asked, with all this in mind, how do you relate to someone with dementia who's nonverbal?
So what I would say is not everyone with dementia is verbal, but everyone with dementia is communicative. So keep in mind that you may have to work a little bit harder to find, those cues of whether someone is comfortable with something. But still, what I always say is assume those senses are changing. Assume they are experiencing the world differently. And even though they may not be able to explain what they're experiencing, if you watch, what they're doing, watch how they move, that may be, and facial expression and body language, that is probably going to be your best form of communication with them. One of my struggles that we don't have enough research on and we don't talk enough about is pain in individuals living with dementia, and how do we assess pain? And my thought on that is, even if someone is nonverbal, we pay attention to their cues, their body language, their facial expression. If something changes very quickly, it might be a pain issue. And the reason I say that is sometimes, someone will say, my dad has dementia, but he's usually, very pleasant, but today he woke up and he was aggressive. Is that normal for dementia? Well, I'm not saying aggression, doesn't happen, but you don't go overnight with that. And I know that's a little bit, off topic, but, I would just say, everyone is communicative, whether that is verbal or that is nonverbal. And if something changes very quickly, you want to consider the idea that there is a UTI, happens a lot, and also maybe pain involved.
Awesome. Thank you, Elaine. This was so helpful. I learned so much from you every time I hear you speak, and I know a lot of people learned from you today. So thank you so much for your time. And everyone, thank you for your time today. I know a lot of people have to get off to their day and to lunch and things, but great to see you all. Really thankful for this champion team. I'll be sending a follow-up email with the recording and some other information, and we'll stay connected on the newsletter. So thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks, Elaine.